Hello, friends, and welcome back to Film Choin. We are continuing the Oscars project, and today we will be discussing the 1971 Best Picture Award winner, The French Connection. That year, the other nominees were A Clockwork Orange, Fiddler on the Roof, The Last Picture Show, and Nicholas and Alexandra. And The French Connection is classified as a neo-noir action thriller film. Directed by William Friedkin, and with Gene Hackman, Roy Scheider, and Fernando Rey. It's based off a 1969 book written by Robin Moore with the same name, and it tells their story of the narcotics detectives. So, yeah. So I'm here with Chris and Jared. How's everybody doing?
Excited?
Bonjour, mon ami.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very excited to talk about French Connection. We are solidly in super film territory, like in the most influential films of all time territory for the next lot of years. So this is good fun.
Yeah, based on a true story, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And I think both of you had seen this before, right? At some point.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting with that. How much I didn't remember about the film. It's quite an exciting film at times. Lots of chase scenes, lots of car chase scene in particular is still one of the best ever.
Yeah.
But also just a lot of running too. People chasing people.
It's again, doing this in progression from the 60s through the 70s, you see such a very different style with this film from what we've seen beforehand at all. This is very, very documentary style. A lot of like handheld camera, a lot of like on the street, kind of following people, doing that kind of thing. And I didn't remember this, but there's an awful lot of boring police work as well, which is somehow, heightened and exciting and stuff. But there's a lot of nothing happening for a long time, a lot of waiting about and a lot of just peering in through windows and that kind of stuff. But pulls it off because I think of the way that they make the film.
A lot of, I think it's pretty quickly you start to notice the very large, like very far back, wide angles, and then it zooms in to someone. It kind of gives you that voyeuristic feeling like you're watching something you shouldn't be watching, or kind of you're spying on somebody, or you're invading someone's privacy in some way that you're kind of
absolutely
peering in on someone, and that's probably how they felt too.
Yeah, what I noticed was the with the directing and the choreography was many of the scenes where somebody's stalking somebody else or chasing somebody else, they're all have a tunnel type of setup, so that it's either going down a tunnel or having a going down a bridge and following a walkway, and a very tunnel type of shot. And then whenever they came into Brooklyn for the first time, everything's wide shot. Everything's like Steve said, panoramic wide shot, and they very cleverly had the action separated from the drama in that manner throughout the film. Really, is very clever filming of all those various aspects, and I liked how they did that. Of course, the car chase scene was out of this world, fantastic, and it had a lot of that. The car going into under a bridge that you're following this tunnel like railings and stuff like that, and then the next car right after it, and it was just it was pretty good, really good cam work, and it was really the strength of the film, I think, when you think about it, because we'll talk about the characters in a little bit, but really the strength of the film was the filming in the camera work, I thought.
Yeah, it's very much a film that relies on the city as being like very much part of the character of another character of the film, and especially when you consider how busy that city is normally, to be able to see that action at that level is kind of mind blowing. And I'll touch on this later, but it's the kind of thing they could never do again because it cost them a fortune in bribes, essentially, to be able to film the way that they did. And they had to get 2 New York cops to basically follow them around and clear the way for them all the time, and sort of use their influence in much the same way as Popeye and the other guy, I can't remember, Motion Schneider's character.
Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy.
Or no, sorry, the other,
that's interesting.
The only other film I can think of that I was impressed with kind of the use in the city was like Vanilla Sky, when they had Times Square completely empty. I don't know how they pulled that off, but
I love that.
Yeah, I think and I remember the film Ronin doing a similar thing in Paris.
Very similar.
Yeah, but that's interesting, Chris. He's mentioned the character of New York City. You're right, it's very much so. But even Marseille had a little character to it.
Absolutely.
Before when we went back and forth to different 2 different places, so that was very well done.
Yeah. And to touch on something you talked about there before, Jared, you're absolutely right. The kind of way he focuses, especially when he's chasing Fernando Rey's character Alain through the city, where he's kind of lost in misdirection, that could very easily have went wrong. You could have lost the viewer at that point because it is very much a wide open street and there's lots of people going both ways, and he uses it, but he did use the idea of going down into the subway again to refocus it, the kind of the idea that he was following him and it was kind of a straight path at that stage. And as you say, that very clever way of having the viewer along for that ride and for that chase, and knowing that, if he's going down that way, he must be following somebody, and then it leads to this incredible in and off the subway scene, which is just it's brilliant.
a little too obvious with the back and forth, and a little not very subtle.
Yeah, I don't think there was any sense of subtlety in like figuring out who was after who and their reasons for doing it. It was pretty straightforward on hitting you on the head. Yep, this is it, this is what's happening.
And there's no way you could describe Popeye Doyle's character as ever being subtle in any kind of way. He was the worst tailing person anybody's ever seen.
Very
You're
aggressive.
right. Yep.
He was very overly kind of over with his mannerisms and the way he would kind of get, really excited and angry and yelling, and so he had that kind of personality. Very determined, and that, I'm sure we'll get to the end of the film, but it really comes. It really rears its ugly head at the end.
Yeah. Sure it does. Yeah. It is interesting because if you think about Popeye Doyle's as a character, he doesn't change. Like there doesn't seem to be much character growth with this character at all. He pretty much stays the same through the whole film, and he had this kind of this determination to be right at the expense of all else, and that of course leads to the kind of tragedy at the end there, and that and the film just stops, it cuts off, and it's like, there's no like denouement, there's no chance to soak it in, there's no chance for the character to soak it in and realize what he's done and how his bullheadedness got him where he's at. And I'm really curious about the choices to how to end this film.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that struck me this time that I hadn't realised before is how desperate Popeye's character is. His just whole general demeanour. He gets more and more desperate as the film goes on, which leads to him sort of unraveling at the end. Even though he shoots the guy, I think my takeaway the first time I saw it was, that's just a tragic accident, but it was almost inevitable in some ways, because he nearly shot Russo as well. Before that, could have just very easily have shot him as well. So this kind of devolvement of the character, and he's not like other buddy cop things that he's incredibly talented. I don't think we get the sense that he's incredibly talented in this. In the way sometimes in neo-noir buddy cop films like this, you get that this guy's really operating at a high level and all of that kind of stuff. He's just frantic, and he gets more and more frantic as things goes on. He's not a good tail. Like, I could have worked out that he was tailing me at any stage, and yet I think he thinks he's kind of furtive and clever and that kind of stuff and not know what's going on, but you never get that sense of him. He's just kind of on edge, and increasingly so as the film goes on, which is very much in contrast to his partner, who is cool as a cucumber kind of the whole way through. There's a couple of scenes where he puts himself in the middle of it. It's an incredible contrast.
And I know the I forget the character that he shoots at the end, the other officer that's helping, but he does, throughout the film, they have that tension between the two of them, and whenever you're involved, somebody gets killed, and there's always this kind of back and forth. And at the end, I didn't really feel like he felt bad killing him, like just because of that relationship they had. He didn't really. There was like no remorse. It was just, oh well, okay, well, on with.
Well, he basically reloads his gun, doesn't he? And he cleans his gun out, puts new bullets in, and is like, we need to find this guy. It's not. There's no tragedy of it. It's just, oh well, this is the line of work that we're in, so to speak, rather than anything else. And even at the end, when it does stop at the end, as you quite rightly said, Jared, we just get a very brief description of what happens him at the end, in terms of he's just reassigned, and that's it. And it's sort of inferred that the fallout of that maybe has caused that in some way, but it gives this very imperfect main character to follow, because he is quite racist the whole way through it. He has this kind of very Boolean nature through it. He's not really a hero in a lot of ways, but he is our view to catching the bad guys, and it sort of sets, I think, because of its time, and it sets the tone for an awful lot of 70s films that tried to copy this style in a lot of ways. You had this very imperfect main character that's in a position of power that we're supposed to root for, but also don't really like the whole way through. And this is, it's incredible how much this film has been aped, I think, in a lot of ways. In fact, I wondered for yourself, not having seen it before, Steve, whether you could separate the fact that it's been so influential from like seeing every other film in the 70s kind of trying to do what it did and yet enjoying it in its own terms.
Yeah, I think we talked the direction and the cinematography, I think, were the two things that stood out to me, and the kind of the grittiness. It had like kind of a dirty feel to it. It didn't really feel very clean and vibrant. It had a dreary kind of tone throughout.
Definitely.
And yeah, you do see the influence and how other films have taken aspects of this movie throughout history from that point on, to especially the car chases and the tailing the suspects and the back and forth between the different officers. And what I like the sound effects when the very obnoxious sound effects, the pitching, the bullets flying past it. But no, I think I was trying to think back to kind of the unlikable character and if this was something new from the other movies we've seen, but I think in a way, like something like Lawrence of Arabia is kind of similar. I mean, it's a character that kind of descends into something else, becomes something else. I don't know if he's necessarily unlikable in Lawrence of Arabia, but kind of, I think this took it up another notch as far as unlikability goes.
Yeah, the thing with Lawrence of Arabia and the other movies we've seen is the character goes through the arc. He's likable, but then he goes through an unlikable period, but then there's kind of a redemptive period, so you get that full character arc, whereas Popeye Doyle, you don't get that. He's the same bastard he was when he started out at the end, and he sets himself up as this overachiever, but it's never for a good reason that he's overachieving. It's just his drive and his bullishness, and that doesn't change at the end. And I guarantee you, if he gets reassigned, like it says at the end, no doubt, he didn't learn anything. He's gonna do the same damn thing. Wherever he goes, he's gonna be the same way, and I think that's his that's who he is in a nutshell. He's the leopard whose spots don't change.
It also seems kind of a setup and kind of a, I think, going into the 80s, this is early 70s, but even late 70s, early 80s on the war on drugs, and when that became, kind of a rallying cry. It seems almost ahead of its time in that way, because it seems like it seems like a big, it doesn't seem like a huge deal. You get the feeling that this kind of thing happens a lot. So it seems small scale, but you kind of get the pointlessness of it all. I mean, all the different people that were killed in the crossfire and people who were hurt, and the back and forth that's done, and you see it's funny that it's kind of leading up to that point in history, but so it seems a little bit like it was predicting, or kind of a commentary on that too. It doesn't seem like this really earth shattering deal that they uncovered. It seems kind of just another day in the office kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a very small amount of drugs, I think, at the end. It's not the bulging suitcases and stuff that you see. It's very much a Mickey Mouse thing, and the captain makes the point that nothing else has been happening in narcotics while they're chasing this deal, so to speak. And I think in some ways, because it's French and it's kind of foreign nationals coming in, it's sort of heightened again, sort of prescient for the changing way of the world that it was. To me, it mimics very clearly a lot of the European style films that were getting made at that time, which, especially the Italian film, it reeks of that. What we call the Years of Lead films, where they had very Eurocrime, that had this very much this style of plot, this kind of style of conflict, and this kind of almost war on the streets thing over gangs fighting with each other, and in this case the police gang fighting against this kind of small operation that was happening there, and not really affecting the day-to-day lives and the crime that happened there. So I think that part's really interesting. And just to go back to the point that you made before about Lawrence of Arabia, which I think is a really good point, he is a very flawed character, but I often think, having seen this and looking back, that was almost a fantasy film, and this film being played very much in what would have been seen the real world kind of brings that flawed character much more into focus, if you know what I mean. Because it's all right within the desert that nobody's been to and everybody's kind of wearing kind of these very different garb and clothes, but this is very much in places that people would recognize, the street corners and that kind of stuff, and the chases throughout the system, that very exciting, but also just kind of pervade this idea that you live in a crime-ridden city. Just that very nature of that happening.
Yeah, that's true.
Very true. Yeah, it's kind of funny because when the film started off right away, it still kind of had that 60s Hollywood intro with the blaring horns, and
yes.
But I felt it was a little bit more dissonant, and almost like they were kind of throwing you off from the typical Hollywood openings that we've been seeing throughout the 60s, and they were kind of like, they gave it, the music was very almost off tone and dissonant compared to what we were used to, and it kind of like, it almost sets your nerves on edge when you hear it. And then then we get into the chase scene and the murder in Marseille right away, and so it was really setting you up to not be that relaxed as you're watching this movie.
I think, like you mentioned that, Jared, about the dissonance and the kind of, you don't ever feel really comfortable. I wonder if that's kind of the attitude, or kind of what Papa was feeling the entire time, never really comfortable and always kind of on edge and kind of just kind of wound up and wanting to do something and a little bit out of control.
Yeah, makes sense. I read a thing where the director had to talk Gene Hackman into doing this role the way, into being such a jerk, on screen like that. Hackman had some problems with it and didn't want to come off that way. And but he had to talk him into it, and he did, and it gave him the best best actor Oscar. So wow. I guess it worked.
Made his career. Yeah,
yeah, made his career. Yeah.
He's a well-known recluse, was Gene Hackman, right throughout his career. He's kind of a bit. He didn't want to really be in the limelight and didn't want to play certain people, but he was very good at it. You see, and I think that was kind of his problem. You know, because maybe when he worked on sets, etc., it was like him flipping a switch. It must have been very effective when you were part of that ensemble cast, if you know what I mean, to have this guy that presented one thing, and as soon as the camera went on, he switched on. I would imagine in a filmmaking sense that's very powerful in terms of like getting everybody else into character and getting everybody else in the moment to say like we're doing something here. And even the fact, like Fernando Rey, who's the main guy, Alan, he's in every European film of the time as the bad guy. He's very well known as that guy in that period. If you go into his IMDb, or you see the amount of films that he made in kind of that genre, I've seen countless of them over the years, and he's very, again, I didn't know him when I watched it the first time, but watching it now I was like, oh, this was a very clever piece of casting, because he has that kind of look about him that says, you know, he could be your grandfather, but there's darkness here. That beard hides the darkness. And even the young trophy wife and stuff, like they only touched on that very briefly at the start, and the fact she buys him and she's set up very nice, but it's almost like that location where she is very distant from his real life, and the way he uses people and that kind of stuff is a very clever piece of casting there as well, I think.
Did you see how stereotypical he was when he was in New York and he had to go to the French restaurant, and they bring out the French onion soup and the cognac and the filet mignon and the French coffee afterwards? I'm just like,
sounds like dinner at Jared's house. Sounds like
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I'm getting hungry. But it was just so like really pouring it on thick. I was just like, you're pouring on the stereotype big time. But it kind of went along with Doyle being so racist and having his own bias stereotypes against every other, you know, ethnicity in the whole film. And and I was just like, at first I was like, man, that's just too obvious, but then it kind of fit. Everything about this film was a little hit you over the head obvious as far as it was going along, and it kind of fit with the rest of the film, and it's just, I found it amusing.
Yeah, it's funny how you know, you hear certain words in this movie and I thought, whoa, I kind of like, oh, like said that, but it's funny the reaction that we get. I wonder what the reaction was then, if there was a reaction to certain words that were used in this one that you just, you know, you don't hear very often. So
true, very true. And what's up with the picking feet in Poughkeepsie? That line kept coming up, and I'm just like, what is that? I have no idea.
I thought that was maybe a reference that I didn't get because it wasn't American or something, or, you know.
I mean, I think Poughkeepsie's like an upstate New York or something like that. So I think maybe it has something to do with just like not having anything to do. You know, because Doyle is just super driven guy who's, like I said, his own self-overachiever. And I think it just has something to do with it's, you know, in Doyle's case, I think it's derogatory towards people who want to just sit on the porch and relax and drink iced tea or something, you know. And so I have a feeling it's like that, but man, he just kept bringing it up. Like, it just kept coming up amongst him and his you know, his cop cronies there.
There's a film called the Poughkeepsie Tapes. It was like a low budget horror movie. That's it's a disturbing film, but I wonder if it was a nod to that term in this movie or not. It's just, seems like
Yeah. Or maybe it's where cops go to retire and die. I have no idea.
Then they go to Florida, right?
Well, good observations, but yes, could mean any of those things. But it definitely was used as a slander against somebody to basically say, "This is all you are," you know.
Yeah, right.
Almost like a class based thing.
The train section was something. That was a great sequence there.
Yeah. Both train sequences, the one where he's getting on and off and chasing Fernando Rey at the start, Alan, and then also, like, the brilliant thing about the car chase is that it isn't a chase of two cars. It's a chase underneath a railway line, which makes it, just elevates it that even higher, because he's literally watching up rather than ahead the whole time, and
Yeah.
it's so unusual, and the way that it's shot very much at ground level, and I'm kind of weaving in and out, just gives it that kind of sense of speed and danger that you don't normally have. And again, it'd be nice to know, kind of outside of Bullet and things like that, you know, where this kind of sits, you know, between people who would have been going to the cinema and going, oh, this has been done a little bit beforehand or afterwards. I can't even think if Bullet was before this or after it, because it's the other one that sticks in my mind in terms of car chases. I might look that up. Yeah, Bullet was 68, Steve McQueen, so it was before it. But it's so effective because it's not two cars, and you can see what you're chasing. It's literally he's looking up, and then the drama that's happening on the train above him. And the only downside of the entire film, I think, is the use of fake blood.
Yeah,
in the two
I noticed
gunshots.
that. Yeah,
It's so red. It's almost Japanese style.
So obvious. Yep.
And for something that's so gritty and realistic, for the rest of the film, it's like, oh, remember, this is just a film. And maybe that's good in some ways, because it might have been too real, or it might have been too over the top, without that kind of moment to break the tension a little bit, to go, oh, he's been shot, but it's okay, it's ketchup or whatever.
Oh yeah. No, that's yeah. That was like glaringly obvious how fake the blood was. It's just like, you guys didn't use chocolate syrup in your red dye mixture, because that does not look real.
Chris, I think you'd mentioned there's a lot of nothing happening when they're tailing. You know, they're running surveillance on these people. Do you think? I think at the moment it's kind of like, okay, what's going on here? But at the end, when it all wraps up, it kind of makes sense. So do you think it adds or it takes away when you look back on it?
For me, I love that part. In fact, I hate the dramatization of police work sometimes as being sexy the whole way through. Bosch, if anybody watches the TV series, is very much another version of this, where he's literally doing the nuts and bolts for 6 or 7 episodes of going around talking to people and not making any great leaps. And there's no great leap at the end, but you can see how it fits. You can see how he got there. You can see how the fact that them just stalking out and watching these people constantly would have led to them finding the car, to them seeing, you know, it wasn't like this big moment at the end. I went, aha, I'm such a genius, I've worked this out. They literally did the nuts and bolts of it, which I think is what makes it so satisfying, for me anyway, insofar as they just brute forced finding this car. They brute forced kind of getting to the edge and who the bad guys are and connecting it all together, because they were literally standing beside them the whole way. And that's why it took so much time and man hours and effort and all the rest of it. Like, he didn't let anybody else sleep. At the very start of the film, you know,
Yep.
Roy Scheider's character wants to go home to go to bed, when he takes him to the bar, and then he's working the bar, and that kind of leads one thing to leads to another one. He's a very demanding character in that way, but I love that aspect of watching police work, and it's the same when I'm reading crime novels. I sort of don't want to see the genius at play a lot of the time, because it's such an overdone trope. I want to see the nuts and bolts of how you can solve crimes by just going from A to B to C, D, going back to A, and doing that cycle again. I always think that's much more interesting, but it takes real craft to show that well and make it exciting within a film as well.
Yeah. Well, after the long, drawn-out sequences of Patton, I didn't feel that this was slow at all.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it made things like when they were following them at the start, and he turned round and came back to them, and they say just go to the end of the street and turn left. It made things like that quite exciting, because there was like a tension in that, whereby, oh, they're going to get found out or whatever, and it just showed you, no, we'll just continue on and just act normally, and then they could sit and watch them and observe from afar. I think the reality of that, out of that, the very fact that it's a true location, you know, in that kind of way, you could recognise that kind of stuff. This bit in the street, the shop, you peer in, you look inside the shop, you see people doing things that they do within shops. You know, it wasn't like, oh my god, look, we've just happened to be here at the right time. We see them kind of doing the crime or doing the dirty. They're literally just working, and they're kind of trying to make sense of it. And all it does is, it's that Hitchcock thing of, it creates suspense by making you wonder what actually is happening there, because we kind of know that he's a wrong'un, but we don't see anything of it, and they don't see anything of it, but they sense it, and that's what the suspense of it is created, which is, again, clever filmmaking and writing.
That's an interesting point, Chris, because they actually did that with the car. Like, they was shooting that car forever and focusing on that car forever, and like ripping all the seats out and ripping, you know, all the stuff they did that, and finally it's like you started to wonder, like, when are they going to get to a point with this car? And finally somebody brings up a couple of boring receipts and says, oh, the weights are different, and they're like, well, we're not done. You know, and so it's like it kind of emphasizes your point about that boring part of police work, where you're just sitting around waiting, and you keep digging and you keep digging and you keep digging, and that's kind of amusing, because it wasn't just sitting around a car staking somebody out. It was also doing other stuff that on the surface could seem boring, but when it all comes down to it, they actually find something through dog-headedness and just the boring police aspect of it.
Going through a rap sheet at the end about the stats of the car and kind of going through it and kind of doing the checklist, you know, that's it. So it was this color, it was this weight, what weight was it, you know, and then they kind of, well, that's odd. And I sort of contrast it to kind of things that happen later on. Like, if you think of CSI and the amount of people that the rise in popularity of forensic science, they didn't represent that career very well, because that's literally doing tests, sticking things in for test and waiting about an awful lot and kind of doing that repeated thing. But they made it seem very sexy, because it always seemed like they were incredibly smart by the kind of deductions and things they find, but didn't really represent the reality of what that job is. So I think a lot of people that went down that career went, oh, lab work's kind of like very humdrum.
Very,
you know,
it's boring.
And some ways, which you can see, but again, they sexy it up a little bit in terms of these big things. Oh my god, spray it.
Yeah, on a TV show, it's like, on those TV shows, you have the blood sample of incredible coincidence, you know.
Yes, indeed, exactly right. And again, in this film, it works so well because there is very little of that. If there is anything, it's literally the weight of the car. But it's also a nothing thing.
Yeah. Interesting.
I was beginning to think that they had outsmarted Doyle somehow, and they had because I thought he's just going to look like an idiot now, but when they had that little moment at the end, it's like, what was that weight? Kind of just, you ask the right mundane question at the right time, and that leads to a major break. It's kind of almost dumb luck, but enough experience to know what to ask for, what to look for. But I feel like
the really exciting part about that is, again, how they shot it. They kind of shoot it like they're going to find nothing. You see Doyle looking defeated when they go back to the workshop, and they kind of, you know, he's prancing about. He's almost, you can smell that desperation in him, and he's given up. Like, he goes and rips up the car, and he's given up, and he's sitting back, and he's kind of given up. They've got us, the beat us, rather than kind of, you know, having the music going in the background, going, you know, building tension and tension till they find it. They didn't do any of that. They kind of made it look like it was the end of the road. They'd wasted their time. And again, the very most mundane fact coming from Roy Scheider's character in terms of, like, he's just the quiet guy. He's the almost the polar opposite to Popeye Doyle in some ways, and just kind of going, right, I'll do nothing. And even when he goes back and sees Devereaux, you know, to pick up the car, plays it really straight. Oh, just came in, guys. It's you can take the car and kind of set it off. He's the total opposite of Doyle in that way, because Doyle wouldn't have been able to resist kind of collaring them and pushing them to it and kind of sticking them up against the wall and doing it and blowing it immediately at that stage, whereas Russo's character was very different.
How they put that car back together? After all that, must have taken him a
It's a
while.
different car. It's a different car. It's got to be a different car. They've got 500 or 600 cars. Remember, they were in pound at the time. All they need to do is switch the plates of a similar model, because I don't think that guy knew exactly the make and model of the car. All they were interested in was the drugs and the...
Yeah, they put the drugs back in, though. So, yeah.
Knew what they were looking for.
I go back and forth about the end, though, about nothing really ever being resolved, and everybody, they get reassigned. They kind of almost get the feeling they ruin their careers. They're kind of blacklisted. They're just kind of probably doing desk work or something boring after that. And the big bad gets away. He's living somewhere in France, living it up. So on one hand, I like that there wasn't a happy ending, but on the other hand, it's kind of a little bit of a bummer, I guess, after all that.
Yeah, reality bites. Because I guess since it was based on a true story, that's probably what actually happened. And so it was just not very not very movie goer. I came out of this satisfied with this nice ending and stuff like that. It's kind of like, oh wow, they yeah, that just ended like that. And it's kind of anti audience, really, and you get it. You get why it ends like that, because it's based on a true story, and also it does kind of fit with how the whole film was going. But on the other hand, you kind of want something a little bit more pleasing to think about. But it's one of those things where you have to come to grips with what you're expecting, I guess, out of a film.
I think it also kind of goes to show the kind of slipshod nature of the investigation, because they sort of just wanted to catch the guys in the act, but without just catching the guys in the act was not enough to build the case around. And it did feel again in this watch, when they get to the end and they kind of showed the kind of the very slight charges they all get caught up on, that they really hadn't got anything. They just had a lot of people standing in a warehouse where drugs were in. They didn't have the exchange, they didn't have the dealing, they literally had money in another car that drove away from it. And anything they would have had to got in interrogation or otherwise. So there really wasn't much of a case to be made against all those people in it. And I think it kind of shows the reality of, there's a certain way to do the job that's exciting and all that kind of stuff, and then there's a way to do the job that kind of says, again, we're going to tick these things off and kind of do this right in the kind of investigation, and sort of prove the captain right insofar as they didn't really have anything the whole time. They had a suspicion that this was going on, but they didn't have anything tangible to hang it to. And other than his pig-headedness and getting everybody to work off hours and sit in a car at 4 o'clock in the morning, they really didn't, there was nothing else there. So I sort of liked that part of the end of it, because he wasn't a good cop. he just wasn't a good cop. He made for good viewing and watching, but with what we know kind of about it now, it's very different,
Yeah, he and they point that out too a couple times in the beginning, where they say, he's like, I got a hunch, and he's like, and one of the other cops was like, one of your hunches got somebody killed or something like that previously. He was already on thin ice for his hunches, whereas hunches don't make good police work, and so that was like I said, that was hammered home. So like a lot of things were in this film.
And the biggest crime in the whole film was perpetrated by himself, which was the murder of the agent. So that was also brushed under the rug. It seems like they got reassigned, but it doesn't seem like he was he was taken to task for it, you know.
Yep.
You wonder if they made up a story on what happened to him or not.
Mm,
They covered
maybe.
for each other.
But the only people that could have attested was him and his partner.
Yeah.
And like that would have been very easy. That's almost watertight in some ways. Like all you have to do is kind of stick to the same story and it'll go away. And it's sort of underlined kind of the idea that they know it's bullshit, but they also, you know, they just reassigned him. You know, that was as much as they could do. Just move him around the system to another spot and then see what happens. But luckily, there's a French connection too. You know?
So I guess the question that we always ask when we're on these is, where does this kind of fit on the list so far?
That's a good question.
Good question. Yeah, that list is getting long.
This is getting long, and this is a very different type of movie, I think, than again we've seen. We're moving into a new style of filmmaking, one that sort of mimics and works with European filmmaking of the 60s and stuff, and using those influences. And you can't really compare it against all the musicals that are there. I mean, it's a bit as far opposite from that side.
Yeah, jeez, you got musicals, you got the you know, the epic big long story, historical, the epic
Yes,
history,
the epic
historical film, and then you got the socially conscious films. Interesting.
Is okay. I'll make this the two most films that most commonly from the ones we've seen that would sit kind of alongside it in some ways are Midnight Cowboy and then The Heat of the Night. The other two American, very clearly set in a time and a place thing. How do they rank against those two?
Right. Yeah.
It's not much of an easier question, but it does limit the scope a little bit. They're three fantastic movies, like,
And they're
there's no
three
doubt about
great
that.
movies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I think Midnight Cowboy would be number one. This would probably be number two for me in those three. And I think it would be number two because of the influence that it's had,
Yeah.
and kind of, and also the story. I think in The Heat of the Night, the twist at the end was a little. It just didn't really.
Yeah.
But still a great film.
Yeah, but both films actually, I think it's fair to say, sort of dropped the ending a little bit. You know, in some ways, like I think that's fair to say. But endings are hard to do,
Mm-hmm.
and sort
Yeah.
of the fact that they aren't wrapped up nicely is what makes them stick in the head as well. I think that's also true. You know, you're better fudging the ending in a weird way than kind of being a very predictable ending, because then it disappears into nothing and you lose the effectiveness of the film.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think plot-wise and story-wise, I think Midnight Cowboys are stronger of the three. But
Yeah.
but it was
Yeah.
fun.
Impossible question. It'll get even harder with next year.
Yeah.
It was fun.
So next
was
up is Godfather.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Godfather one's next. It's a pity we don't get to see any more Billy Friedkin films in the thing, because his next couple of films are pretty amazing as well. His next film is probably the greatest horror movie of all time, which was The Exorcist,
No kidding.
73, and then he did Sorcerer in 77. He did Cruising in 88 or 80. He's a much beloved filmmaker who quite recently died. Actually, I thought it was more recent, but it was 2023 that he died in. Made some great movies to Billy Friedkin.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys can think of for this one?
Oh, the other thing I'd like to say, the runtime was spectacularly good.
Didn't have an intermission, wasn't it?
Didn't have an intermission. Was 1 hour 40 something. I was
Yeah.
like, I feel like watching it twice, back to back, just so that I can fit in with the rest of the other Oscar films that we've seen. See what happens when you cut out the songs.
Don't celebrate too much because The Godfather's 3 hours.
The Godfather's coming up, but it doesn't feel like a 3-hour movie, as far as I remember.
Yeah, I suppose I'm a little nervous about that. It's been a while since I've seen it, but
I think
I
we'll
don't
be all
remember
right.
feeling the length. But
It's great. It's a masterclass of acting. Is Godfather like this?
Yeah, I've seen it like several times, so
Yeah.
it's worth it, no matter how long it is.
Yeah.
So,
forward to that.
Yeah.
So until then, Jared, where can people find you?
you can find me at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and you can find me on Speculative Speculation Podcast, and on some other podcasts here on Page Chewing as well.
A couple of it, yeah. And Chris, what about you?
Yeah, and much the same places as Jared. You can find me in the Chronicle of Chris YouTube channel. We're talking about books there. And yes, on Page Chewing, which I think you should rename to just the home of the read along and podcasts. Because there's literally a read along and a podcast and a watch along for everything that anybody has any semblance of interest in. It's great.
We don't do anything alone anymore, do we?
No, but don't do anything alone. Doing things alone is boring. Doing communal. Yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah, all the links will be down below. Thanks everyone for watching along with us. If you were watching along, there's a link in the description to send us a message. Let us know how horrible we are and how wrong we are about whatever it is you said. And if you'd like to join us, join the Page Train forums and say hello. Come by and join us. So until next time, we will talk to everyone very soon.